Yesterday morning at precisely 6 o'clock a.m. Beijing time, the People's Liberation Army initiated the largest military exercise in Chinese history. The operation, designated Sacred Sword 2026, involved forces across all service branches operating in coordinated maneuvers designed to simulate the invasion and occupation of Taiwan. 240 aircraft filled the skies over the Taiwan Strait. 80 naval vessels formed assault groups in waters off the Chinese coast. 35,000 troops moved through staging areas, boarded amphibious craft, and executed landing operations on beaches chosen for their similarity to Taiwan's coastline. The exercise was not hidden. Chinese state media broadcast footage of fighters taking off, ships moving into formation, and Marines storming ashore. The message was intended for multiple audiences. Domestically, it demonstrated strength and resolve. Regionally, it signaled capability and intent. And globally, it posed a question that military planners in Washington, Tokyo, Seoul, and Canberra were now scrambling to answer. Could the United States defend Taiwan if China attacked today? The answer, delivered in classified briefings to senior officials, was unambiguous. No, not with current force deployments, not with the resources available, not while 60% of the Pacific Fleet was committed to operations in the Persian Gulf, thousands of miles away from the theater where it might actually be needed. The exercise unfolded in phases that closely mirrored what an actual invasion would look like. Phase 1 involved establishing air superiority. J-20 stealth fighters, China's most advanced aircraft, flew combat air patrols designed to clear the skies of enemy aircraft. J-16 strike fighters conducted simulated attacks on air defense sites, runways, and command centers. H-6K strategic bombers launched cruise missiles at targets representing critical infrastructure. The air component demonstrated China's ability to suppress Taiwan's defenses and create the conditions necessary for a naval operation. Phase 2 was the naval blockade. Destroyers and frigates formed a cordon around the simulated target area, practicing the interdiction of supply ships and the enforcement of an exclusion zone. Submarines patrolled deeper waters, positioned to engage any vessels attempting to break the blockade. The Chinese Navy has invested heavily in anti-access and area denial capabilities, specifically designed to prevent foreign navies, particularly the U.S. Navy, from intervening in a Taiwan scenario. The exercise showcased those capabilities in detail. Phase 3 involved the amphibious assault itself. 6 separate beach landing sites were chosen. Amphibious assault ships launched landing craft carrying armored vehicles and troops. Helicopters transported additional forces directly to inland objectives. Airborne units, dropped from transport aircraft, secured key positions to support the beach landings. The entire operation was coordinated with precision, demonstrating that China had practiced this scenario extensively and possessed the capability to execute it at scale. Phase 4 simulated the occupation. Troops moved into urban areas, secured government buildings, established checkpoints, and took control of media infrastructure. The political objective of an invasion is not just military defeat, but the imposition of control. The exercise demonstrated that Chinese planners understood this and had developed the tactics and procedures necessary to achieve it. The scope and scale of the exercise were unprecedented. Previous Chinese military drills had involved smaller forces, shorter durations, or less realistic scenarios. This was different. This was a full dress rehearsal conducted with operational units using real equipment and executing the actual tactics that would be employed in combat. And it was happening at a moment when the United States was least able to respond. The Pacific Fleet, the primary instrument of American military power in the region, consists of approximately 60 major combatants: aircraft carriers, destroyers, cruisers, and submarines. Under normal circumstances, this force is distributed across the Pacific to maintain presence, conduct exercises with allies, and provide the capability to respond to crises. But circumstances were not normal. 2 aircraft carriers, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and the USS Theodore Roosevelt were operating in the Persian Gulf as part of the campaign against Iran. 14 destroyers and 2 cruisers were with them, providing air defense, strike capability, and logistical support. Another dozen support vessels were part of the carrier strike groups. In total, approximately 30 ships, representing half of the Pacific Fleet's major combatants, were committed to operations 7,000 miles from the Pacific. The remaining forces were insufficient to defend Taiwan against a determined Chinese assault. The USS Ronald Reagan, the carrier normally based in Japan, was in port undergoing maintenance and was not available for deployment. The 8 destroyers still in the Pacific were scattered across vast distances, engaged in routine patrols and exercises. Concentrating them would take days, and even then, they would face a Chinese fleet that outnumbered them significantly and operated close to its own bases with the advantages of land-based air support and shorter supply lines. Taiwan's own military, while capable and well-trained, could not hold out indefinitely without American support. The Republic of China Armed Forces consist of approximately 165,000 active personnel and 1.5 million reservists. The Air Force operates around 400 aircraft, but many are older models facing obsolescence. The Navy has 117 ships, most of which are small patrol craft, unsuitable for contesting control of the strait against a modern Chinese fleet. Taiwan's strategy has always relied on the assumption that it could resist long enough for American forces to arrive and tip the balance. Intelligence assessments estimated that Taiwan could hold out for 2 to 3 weeks if fighting alone. After that, ammunition would run low, casualties would mount, and defensive positions would be overrun. The problem was that American reinforcements could not arrive in 2 weeks. Even if the decision were made immediately to redeploy forces from the Gulf, the transit time would be 14 days minimum. And that assumed that the ships could simply leave their current operations, which they could not. Withdrawing the carriers from the Gulf would mean abandoning ongoing missions, leaving allies exposed, and conceding strategic positions that had been hard-won. The political and military costs would be enormous. Beijing understood this calculus perfectly. Chinese strategists had been watching the Iran conflict closely, analyzing American deployments, assessing operational tempos, and calculating vulnerabilities. They had concluded that a window of opportunity existed. For the first time in decades, the United States was militarily overextended to the point where it could not simultaneously manage a crisis in the Middle East and a war in the Pacific. The exercise was both a demonstration of capability and a test of American resolve. The reaction from U.S. allies in the region was immediate and alarmed. In Tokyo, Prime Minister issued a statement calling for consultations with Washington on regional security. The language was diplomatic, but the concern was clear. Japan hosts significant U.S. military presence, including bases that would be critical in any defense of Taiwan. Japanese officials needed assurance that American commitments were still reliable. The exercise suggested they might not be. South Korea faced similar anxieties. The US-ROK alliance is built on the premise that American forces will defend South Korea against aggression from the north. But if the United States could not defend Taiwan because its forces were committed elsewhere, what did that mean for Seoul? North Korea, observing the situation, had already increased artillery drills near the border and conducted missile tests. Pyongyang was probing, testing whether the distraction of American attention created space for provocation. Australia, a treaty ally through AUKUS and other agreements, confronted the possibility that its security guarantees might be hollow. Canberra had aligned closely with Washington on the assumption that American power would deter aggression in the region. If China could move on Taiwan while the US watched helplessly, what value did those alignments have? Australian officials began quiet discussions about whether alternative security arrangements needed to be considered. The Philippines, which had recently strengthened defense ties with the United States, including granting access to additional military bases, faced the prospect of abandonment. If Washington could not honor commitments to Taiwan, a far more strategically significant partner, would it honor commitments to Manila? The question had no reassuring answer. China amplified these doubts through a coordinated propaganda campaign. State media broadcast commentary emphasizing that the unipolar moment was over, that American hegemony was unsustainable, and that regional countries needed to accept a new reality where China was the dominant power. Belt and Road Initiative investments were highlighted as evidence of China's constructive role in development, contrasted with what was portrayed as American militarism and instability. In Washington, the exercise triggered a strategic debate that had been simmering for months, but could no longer be avoided. The United States was attempting to manage security commitments in multiple theaters with finite resources. The Iran conflict had consumed forces, attention, and political capital. The war was not going well. Casualties were mounting. Costs were escalating. Public support was eroding. And now China was demonstrating that it saw an opportunity to achieve its most important strategic objective, the reunification of Taiwan. Military commanders presented stark assessments. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs told the president that defending Taiwan with current deployments was not possible. 3 to 4 aircraft carriers would be needed as a minimum to contest Chinese control of the air and sea around Taiwan. Currently, 1 was available, and it was in maintenance. Even if forces were withdrawn from the Gulf immediately, they would arrive too late if China moved quickly. Strategic planners had run war games simulating exactly this scenario: Chinese attack on Taiwan, while U.S. forces were committed to Iran. Every iteration produced the same result. Taiwan fell before American reinforcements could arrive. The question then became whether the United States would attempt to retake the island, which would require an amphibious operation against a defended coastline at the end of extended supply lines. The answer was that such an operation would be extraordinarily costly and might not succeed. The political leadership faced an impossible choice. Ending the Iran conflict to free up forces for the Pacific would be seen as capitulation to Iranian pressure and abandonment of regional allies in the Gulf. It would damage American credibility globally. But continuing the Iran conflict while China threatened Taiwan meant accepting that the United States could not defend a partner it had implicitly guaranteed for decades. That would also damage credibility, perhaps more severely. Some voices argued for a middle approach: reduce commitments in both theaters, accept limited objectives, and avoid overextension. But limited objectives were difficult to define and harder to achieve. Wars do not pause conveniently to allow strategic repositioning. Iran was not going to stop fighting because the United States needed to hedge against China. And China was not going to suspend its timeline for Taiwan to accommodate American force rotation schedules. Intelligence assessments estimated that China's window for action was between 6 and 12 months. The current exercise demonstrated that PLA forces were trained and ready. The political leadership in Beijing had made reunification with Taiwan a core objective. President Xi Jinping had stated that the issue could not be passed down to future generations. Domestic political considerations within China created pressure to act, and the strategic opportunity created by American overextension might not last. If the United States managed to extricate itself from Iran and reposition forces to the Pacific, China's advantage would diminish. If Taiwan continued to improve its defenses with American assistance, the cost of invasion would rise. If international pressure mounted, perhaps through sanctions threats or diplomatic isolation, Beijing might face constraints. The current moment, with America tied down in the Gulf and distracted by domestic political crisis, represented the best conditions China was likely to encounter. Taiwan's leadership understood the implications. Publicly, President Tsai maintained confidence in American support and emphasized Taiwan's determination to defend itself. Privately, civil defense preparations were accelerated. Reservists were called up for additional training. Ammunition stockpiles were distributed to local units. Shelter drills became weekly events in major cities. The government was preparing for a scenario where Taiwan would have to fight alone, at least initially. The exercise concluded after 72 hours. Chinese forces returned to base. State media declared the operation a success and a warning to separatist forces. Western analysts noted that the PLA had demonstrated competence and coordination beyond what had been observed in previous drills. The consensus was that China was ready to execute an invasion if the political decision were made. The question was not whether China could invade Taiwan. The exercise had answered that. The question was whether the United States could stop it. And with the Pacific Fleet split between two oceans, with no clear strategy for repositioning forces, and with allies questioning American reliability, the answer was deeply troubling. The rehearsal was over, but the message lingered. China was ready. Taiwan was vulnerable. And America, distracted and overextended, was discovering that the cost of fighting one war might be the inability to prevent another.